Good morning. So, we come to another very interesting point of this course, and today I will be discussing semiotics of cinema. So, some of the key concepts here would be what is image, icon, index, symbol, metonymy, metaphor, etc., and how does the art of cinema appropriate all this. I'd like to start with a quote by the great Hollywood director Frank Capra. Frank Capra, who made classics such as It Happened One Night and Meet John Doe and several more. And he said film is one of these one of the three universal languages, the other two being mathematics and music. The idea is the universal language of cinema. We have been talking about the language of cinema. We have been looking at the various aspects of the language of cinema. And this lecture is a continuation of the language of cinema. The idea is that how semiotics, how an understanding of the semiotics of cinema helps us in understanding the language of cinema. So, at this point I would like to urge you to read the first chapter by André Bazin and his seminal book called What is Cinema, and it will give you an excellent introduction to the basics of cinema, okay, and what is the idea behind a moving image. So, this is what I would like you to look at before we begin the today's class. So, moving on to semiotics. So, the word semiotics is derived from the Greek word semeion, which means sign, S-I-G-N. The modern disciplines of semiotics are invented by two semioticians. The first one is Charles Sanders Peirce, and the second one, very important person, Ferdinand de Saussure. So, these especially Saussure, and he published a general course in linguistics. The lectures that he gave were later published as a book, in a book form, a general course in linguistics. Essentially, semiotics is the study of signs. Now, filmmaking is choosing the precise images for the particular story, and we have to remember every picture tells a story. In today's class, I am going to ask you to watch a number of images and movie stills as well as movie scenes, and then you have to understand that even a movie still, a movie poster tells us a story. It is noteworthy what can be read from a single image. Now, I am applying the theory of semiotics to semiotics of cinema, to the concept of semiotics in cinema. So, for Peirce, Charles Sanders Peirce, there were multiple types of sign, and three main types are worth discussion. Now, we will move on to that, but also let me give you a quote by the great theorist, semiotician Roland Barthes, the French semiotician, who states in his book Mythologies that trivial aspects of everyday life can be filled with meaning, and this includes a number of things. So, in other words, film is the art of visual abbreviation. Cinema is synesthetic as it arouses different senses. Now, when we refer to Roland Barthes' concept of trivial aspects of everyday life that can be filled with meaning, it also includes a character's hairstyle, okay, a character's smile, a gesture. So, all these visual images can be filled with meaning, and that's what we understand. That's what we mean by visual abbreviation. Now, three things. So, there is the icon, which is a sign which is similar to what it signifies. Then there is the index, which is affected by what it represents, and then there is symbol, the symbol which is a sign that is connected to what it signifies by a law or convention. So, indexic indexical or index, this is a direct connection between what is indicated and our understanding of that information. An index is a mode in which the signifier might not resemble its signified object. It is not arbitrarily assigned and is directly connected in some way to the object. Now, Peirce semiotics and sociosemiology have been influential in the studies of the verbal arts. In the article Art as Semiotic Fact, Jan Mokrowski uses the semiotic framework for the study of art and tells us that the work of art should be considered as a sign composed of a signifier and a signification, where signification is an aesthetic object registered in the collective consciousness. Critics have also discussed how visual semiotics can be applied to folk art, folk songs, all kinds of music and theatre. Theatre as a medium is considered by these critics for studying the semiotic structure, which includes decor, costume, voice, music, in other words, the tropes of mise en scène. Now, as we have been talking about, film has a distinctive language. It has its own grammar, its own idiom. It is composed of signs. It is a mosaic of distinctive images and fragmented narratives, and therefore, every fragmented narrative can be explained through the images that are implicit there. Therefore, it would be noteworthy to quote Christian Metz, another great film theorist or semiotician, who says film is hard to explain because it is so easy to understand. Now, this is a loaded statement. Film is so hard to explain because it's so easy to understand, and therefore comes the part of a film scholar or someone who is interested in reading films. You see, everyone has a take on films. Anyone you meet would know that they have a critique or something to offer on any film. But the point is that unless and until you are trained to appreciate film through the theories, so through its science, through understanding its language, till then you cannot claim to have complete understanding of any film. We have been talking about semiotics, and film images are signs. Now, filmmaking is all about choosing the precise images for the particular story. Peter Wallen in Signs and Meanings in Cinema talks of sign as a triptych. He talks about index, icon and symbol that I have already talked about, and indexical signs lead to something important. For example, think of clocks in The Mood for Love, Wong Kar-wai's movie. I have been talking about how even a hairstyle is worthy of reading meanings into an image, and then filmmakers also resort to various other things such as smiles, scars, guns, badges, hairstyle. So, again we are talking about Roland Barthes and trivial aspects of everyday life which are loaded with meaning. At this point, I would like you to watch this particular clipping. This is from a film called Grease. It's a 1970s film, and here is the link to the YouTube. The film stars John Travolta and Olivia Newton-John. Please watch this clipping and come back to me. Now, what did you observe there? So, there are two people sitting in a car here. You have John Travolta, you have Olivia Newton-John. John Travolta's character Denny is obviously making advances towards Olivia Newton-John, who plays a character called Sandy. Now, what are the two distinctive features about the appearances of these two characters? Let's talk about it. So, Danny's clothes and his hairstyle, what do they suggest? They conform to the stereotype of a rock and roll star. Okay, so we are talking about, the movie is a period film, though it was made in 1978. It is actually set during the 50s and the 60s, and it's like a homage to rock and roll stars such as Elvis Presley and the so-called the cool stars of that period such as James Dean. Also, this affected youth kind of roles as popularized by Marlon Brando, particularly in his film The Wild Ones, and of course James Dean and his Rebel Without a Cause. So again, now distinguish John Travolta's appearance with Olivia Newton-John's and her hair, her clothes. So they conform to the notion of the so-called good girl, notions of respectability. So the film has fun with these stereotypes. That's what the film is all about. I'd like you to enjoy the movie, and please do watch this particular song called Summer Nights. I'm giving you the YouTube link to it. Watch the song and come back to me. Here the song also says a lot about the differences between these two characters. Okay, so we have been talking about icon. Now, icon is the sign that represents the objects mainly by similarity. Iconic images are those images which are very familiar to us. These are stories and meanings behind. There are stories and meanings behind such kind of an image. A narrative is frozen in an iconic image. Audrey Hepburn's famous little black dress and her holding a long cigarette holder from Breakfast at Tiffany's can be called an iconic image. Okay, it remains firmly etched in our collective consciousness. So filmmakers construct meanings through such signs. Sign has two parts, importantly, signified and signifier and signified. Signifier is the physical part. It is also called sign as object or the tangible thing that we can touch or see or hear. Signified is the psychological part, which is the reaction to the object, the mental picture a signifier evokes. The internal response to this is the internal response to the signifier. So two things, signifier, signified. Signified is what we see, signifier is what we see, and signified is the mental picture an image or a signifier may evoke. Signified could mean different things to different people. For instance, a rose physically is a rose. So signifier, if you look at rose as a signifier, it's just a flower. But when we start reading meanings into it, so signified, and it can mean different things to different people. For example, let me draw your attention to that famous scene from American Beauty, Sam Mendes' American Beauty, where rose petals and the color red, they are physical objects, so signifier, but they signifies they mean different things to different people. When we see in the opening scene of the film, and we see Annette Bening's character, she is cutting off the stems of roses, red roses. It may even mean that she is at one level emasculating, castrating her husband, as played by Kevin Spacey. But when he encounters Angela, his daughter's teenage friend, then Lester Burnham, that is a character that Kevin Spacey plays, and his character starts undergoing a transformation, and roses and rose petals, they start acquiring a different meaning. While talking about semiotics, we also use a word or term, synecdoche. Now, synecdoche is a relationship of a part to a whole. So often we may say, we may associate a heroine's smile like Marilyn Monroe's smile We may associate cigarette with an actor like Humphrey Bogart, and the cigar with an actor like Clint Eastwood, especially when he plays his the hero from a western movie, the cowboy roles. There is also an expression, a term that you should know, that is metonymy. Now, metonymic or metonymy helps establish a relationship based on association. A metonym substitutes one thing with another. For example, the pen stands in for the written word, the sword stands in for military aggression and force. As a figure of speech, a metonym replaces several changeable things with one vivid image. The visual texts are essentially metonymic. A flag, for instance, is a metonym. It stands for a cause and it symbolizes patriotism. David Fincher's Zodiac is another interesting film that you should be watching in order to understand the concept of signs. Okay, it's a story about a serial killer, a psychotic killer, and there are three men who are interested in discovering the identity of this mysterious killer. And there are several clues and signs that one of the characters, as played by Jake Gyllenhaal, he works out. So that's a very interesting study in understanding signs and codes. Now, as I have already talked about Peter Wallen and signs and meanings in cinema, and he talks about index, icon, and symbol. So, index, for example, is a sign or an image. For example, a tree is a tree, and a woman is a woman, a clock is a clock. An icon has stories and meanings behind the image, and as we have been talking about, a narrative is often frozen in its images. For example, you may recall Tom Hanks' iconic picture sitting on a bench with a bus stand, sitting on a bench waiting for a bus and with his back towards us, and with a briefcase next to him, a suitcase next to him. This is from Forrest Gump, an iconic scene. And again, think of Peter Fonda and Dennis Hopper riding away on the Harley Davidsons. So that is an iconic image from Easy Rider. There are also the concepts of denotation and connotation when we talk about semiotics. So, denotation is the primary direct meaning, whatever we see in a picture, just like signifier. Now, connotation is the secondary indirect meaning depending on the collective cultural attitudes and personal associations. So, for Peter Wallen, symbol is a cultural absolute. To be significant, images in a film should be developed. Now, we will move on to another semiotician, that is Roland Barthes, and his 5 systems of meaning which he gives in his essay S by Z. He calls them codes, and codes function like grammar to a language which can be used to construct meanings. Barthes gives us 5 codes, namely the enigma code, the connotative code, the action code, the symbolic code, and the cultural code. The enigma code is when a film sets puzzles and poses problems and hints at secrets to be divulged and mysteries to be unearthed. The questions that we may ask, what is this going to be about, and what is going to happen next? Also, what happens at the end? At this point, I would like you to watch this clipping from Hitchcock's Vertigo. Please note down the YouTube link. Watch this scene, and then you may understand what is meant by the enigma code. Okay, so having watched that much part of this great film, which is a movie that I would highly recommend if you haven't already watched it. Now, the hero, who is a detective, and he has been requested by a friend of his to follow his wife, because not that he thinks that the wife is having an affair, but the wife has been behaving very strangely of late, and the hero the detective hero as played by James Stewart. He follows this lady, the wife, Madeline, as played by Kim Novak, and he follows her all over the town. That the town is San Francisco, and here is the famous museum scene. And then there is an uncanny resemblance between the lady, that is Madeline, and the lady in the picture, woman in the picture. Okay, and then several clues are given to us about the identity of this woman, and then we are also, it's very enigmatic. We are led to ask ourselves that what is this going on, and where is it, where will all this lead towards. So that is your enigmatic code. Now the connotative code or the semantic code is about the signs that imbue characters and settings with meaning. These signs include speech, clothing, movement and gestures. The code creates illusion of real people having real experiences in real world. The idea of this code is that meaning is the result of the interaction between the film and the audience. The action code is signs belonging to a pattern of an action, and after that I will take you to the symbolic code. I mean, action code is quite simple. You watch a particular clipping or still, let us assume that you look at the poster of a Bruce Lee movie. You know the action of the film. It is going to be a martial arts film. But if you look at the poster of, let us assume, Richard Gere and Julia Roberts standing back to back in a still of Pretty Woman, and you know that it's going to be anything but an action movie. It's going to be a romantic film, a drama, or even a romantic comedy. Okay, so that's the action code for you. So you read meanings into images. Now the symbolic code refers to the way an audience receives text by organizing all experiences into a binary pattern. For example, good versus bad, master versus slave, hero versus villain, true versus false. So this helps in our understanding of what the filmic text means. Now the cultural code. The cultural code encompasses the text references to things already known. It depends on certain shared assumptions of cultural behavior, morality and politics. Culture not only constitutes the self but also constrains the self. These films raise questions about the codes of conduct in a particular social order. For Barth, all 5 of these codes are bound by the weight of convention, what he calls what has already been written and done. It applied to works of literature or films. These signs and codes are like grammar to a language and are used to construct meaning. At this point, I would like you to look up the poster or the still of a film called Falling Down. It's a Joel Schumacher movie, and please watch this still with Michael Douglas. Okay, so here I'll just tell you how to read meanings into a still like that. Now what do you see there? Here is a man, almost middle-aged man, pushing 50s or so. He is standing somewhere in the middle of a park on these stairs. He is surrounded by the cityscape. At the same time, he is in the middle of a park, okay, which is not a very well maintained kind of a space. What are we talking about? Spaces which are not too well maintained, very kind of disorderly. And then this man who is dressed up like a regular man, regular an all American person, and he's also wearing glasses, okay, and he's carrying a briefcase. So perhaps he's a working man. He is someone who has a regular white collar job, but then he is also holding a gun in his another hand. So what does it mean? So you have why is he holding a gun? So that is your enigma code, okay, and because you understand the cultural aspect of cinema, you know what that it raises the question about his code of conduct. The symbolism is very clear, the symbolic code that contrasts the binaries between skyscrapers and the sites which have been demolished with all around him. Okay. And then the connotative codes as understood by his clothes, his hairstyle, glasses, very regular kind of a person. Okay. So, this is what I mean by semiotics, and you can use several meanings into an image just by looking at a picture. So, here is a bibliography. I would like you to read Terence Hawkes' Structuralism and Semiotics, and another very important book is Jonathan Culler's Structuralist Poetics, Structuralism, Linguistics and the Study of Literature, Frederick Jameson's The Prison House of Language, a critical account of structuralism and Russian formalism. So, this is your bibliography. So, thank you very much, and we meet for our next class.